It's not 5 o'clock, and they don't care. Welcome to Wine to 5. Entertainment, education, and everyday drinking for everyday people. Your hosts are Valerie Caruso and Stephanie Davis, two wine educators who don't need a clock to know when to pour that next glass.
Well, hello everybody. In this episode, Val and I are doing a regional wrap filled with lots of factoids about the Loire Valley in France.
Yes, we like to say this is merely an overview, but we thought it was an important region to cover. And we're actually drinking what we're talking this week. Steph.
Yeah, like that never happens. So I'm proud of us.
I know. It's like, oh, let's talk about this. And then we realize we don't have it in the basement. But I actually did have some Loire Valley wine in my basement. Of course, thanks to our wonderfully generous sponsor, I have Chinon in my glass. The 2016 Domaine Clos Gadot Les Malpas Chinon, Loire Valley, France. It's all Cabernet Franc and all delicious on a Friday afternoon.
And all red goodness, huh?
All red goodness. I know. It's a nice cool day. Just sitting here in a sweatshirt and a glass of wine with a microphone. I mean, what's better than that, Steph?
That's pretty ideal, I think. You know, I've got my slippers on and I'm drinking white wine. So,
nice.
You know, I'm kind of with you on this. We love Loire wine, so that's kind of one of the reasons why we're like, we should talk about it until we realized what we got ourselves into. But it helps when you're drinking a really nice Vouvray from Champollion. This is the 2017, and this is imported by Kermit Lynch, and it is 100% Chenin Blanc. The average age of the vines are like 35 years old, and everything's hand done, all indigenous yeast. Very cool wine, very cool producer, and we'll have a link actually because you should check out their other really great wines, including sparkling and all that stuff that we're going to get into in the regional wrap.
Yes, so why are we talking about the Loire today? Because we like it. We want to start with just a little brief history, and here's how we're going to tell the story. The Romans again. Then a bunch of rich people, queens, kings, they did stuff. Don't forget the church. Then war, phylloxera coming back and into their own next.
What?
I know, right? No, we're just kidding. Actually, the Loire Valley, yes, of course it did start with the Romans, like many of the regions, but it was actually considered the cradle of modern France in the Middle Ages. And this is around the 1400s when steps toward independence from England were actually taken in Chinon by Jeanne d'Arc, or Joan of Arc, and Charles VII, who would go on to become king. I think you all know the story of Joan of Arc. But it was the monks in the 1600s that were credited for bolstering viticulture and setting the stage for quality wines for the next 100 or so years. It was also during this time in the Middle Ages, from the 15s through the 1700s, this is when people began building those gorgeous chateaus that you see in the picture. And if you check out the Loire Valley wines on Twitter, the September 19th picture, I believe it was, there's a beautiful chateau reflected in the river. This is where the rich people, remember I said that kings and queens did stuff, don't forget the church, and a bunch of rich people. Well, they built all their vacation homes there. This became kind of the mecca for building their hunting lodges and all these beautiful chateaus, and the kings would come there and build their summer homes, and it was like France for the rich and famous. So this is why we see those along the river today. But it is important to note that portions of the Loire became a UNESCO heritage site in 2000. So just to kind of give you a little bit of geography, Steph, tell us where the Loire is and about that river.
I will say, too, that I have driven through the Loire from Bordeaux, traveling up to Paris to catch a plane. And I had like 24 hours to get there. So we stayed overnight in Tours, and it definitely deserves a UNESCO World Heritage designation because it is just so beautiful, and it was torture to be only there for 24 hours. But this Loire River, which is so beautiful, is a 634-mile-long river. This is big, and its journey is through central France and empties into the Atlantic Ocean. At one time, it was actually connected with the Seine, yet it still holds the title of the longest river in France. There are more than 60 AOCs in the region, hence why we're going to have to try and condense this all into one somewhat short podcast, just to give you an overview. And we're going to name some of them for you in alphabetical order. No. Okay, so we're not doing that. But there are a lot, and that's why this is more of an overview. And this regional wrap, we are going to swim upstream and start down south of the river, right in Pays Nantais. Pays Nantais is also called the Lower Loire area. And we're going to move west to east, lower to upper, if you will. There are changes in climate, grapes, and styles of wine as we go along from west to east. The climate will change from a maritime environment being shrouded in coastal influence to a continental climate, just gradually.
I think that's what's interesting about studying the Loire, because if you do look at it geographically and follow it, trace it from the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the middle, the centre of France, if you will, the Centre region, you can see how you've got that moderating influence from the maritime situation on the Atlantic, and then it kind of goes, okay, it's more maritime and then a little continental, and then it goes, okay, it's more continental than a little maritime, and then it's full on continental as you get to the end. So I think that's really cool, and of course it makes sense. But what we don't have there are a lot of mountains. So when we talk about the Lower Loire or Pays Nantais, as Steph mentioned, we are talking strictly maritime. It's flat. There's no protection from frost. There's none of that. So we can't discount the moderating effects of the Atlantic. And this means moisture. But we're talking mostly about white wines. Yes, there are red grapes there, but it's the Muscadet that we focus on. So it's easier to start here because the focus is only on these handful of grapes. Mostly the white kind, as I mentioned, specifically Melon de Bourgogne, which is Muscadet. And you'll see that on the label. You'll see Muscadet on the label. It's one of the few French appellations that's actually named for the grape, which is interesting. And it's also a region. But Fol Blanche lives here too, as does Pinot Gris. There are red grapes that can be used in the Fiat-Fendien AOCs, but there are white, red, and rosé styles produced. But for the sake of brevity, you don't see those most likely in the store. We're not going to talk about them, at least here in the U.S., at least in our market. But we're going to focus on Muscadet. So there's the Muscadet AOC, the appellation, and the Muscadet Sèvres-et-Maine AOC, and it's got 3 subzones, and we're not going to talk about those today, but we also have the Muscadet Coteau de Loire and Muscadet Côte de Grand Lu, and we should mention that Muscadet Sèvres-et-Maine is where about, I'd say 70-80% stuff, I believe, of Muscadet comes from. It's like most of it. So you'll see Sèvres-et-Maine on the label, and Steph's going to talk about those wines for us next.
And that's what, you're going to see when you're shopping or when you're at the restaurants. So most of the time, the Muscadet is going to be from Sèvres-et-Maine. And they're generally dry, light, fresh, really pleasant wines to drink and really underrated. They should also be consumed when they're young. This is not really a wine that you should be aging and laying down. They do represent a good value, like I said. So 20 and under, often you can find that. And also see Sur Lie on the labels. And if you're wondering what that means, some of you do know, and some of you who don't, that just means it spends some extra time, with the lees, which are the dead yeast cells. That adds like some nice richness and complexity, and maybe also gives it a little bit of a sparkle, like a little slight effervescence. I don't know why I don't drink more Muscadet. That is so crazy to me. I love that wine.
They're great with seafoods, with lighter seafood dishes. I did try pairing one with a seared. They go great with scallops, by the way. But I did try pairing one. I was making a Chilean sea bass, and I had never made it before. I wasn't familiar with the fish, and it was a lemon thyme thing, and it was absolutely terrible stuff. And it was the first time I ever cooked for John.
Oh no!
And I was going to do Muscadet and scallops, but the store didn't have scallops. I went for the Chilean sea bass. I had no idea what a rich, meaty fish this was and how it needed something along the lines of a Chardonnay. And that's what actually we went through. We went through a lightly oaked Chardonnay, and it actually killed it. It was great. Killed it in a good way.
Killed it in a good way.
Yeah, so it's good with seafood, but not for your heavy, rich, meaty fishes. Heads up, warning.
Yeah, and I think it can make a nice aperitif too, so something just light to start off with. Moving on, though, to the Middle Loire, this is where things get really interesting.
So the Middle Loire is also known as Le Jardin de la France, or Garden of France. This is the Chenin Blanc and Cabernet country. As the climate starts to take on some of those continental characteristics we mentioned earlier, like those diurnal swings, but it still has that maritime moderation and influence like moisture. And this means that a variety of styles and wines can be produced here. We're talking Chenin Blanc, and this is what they call Pinot de Loire for the white grapes, but they've also got Arbois and Cheverny, the Cheverny AOC, and also Romorantin appears here. The latter is only known for its Cour Cheverny wines. Cabernet Franc rules the red grape roost. Say that 5 times. Here it's called Breton, but its buddies, Cabernet Sauvignon and Malbec, known as Côte, are also grown here to some degree. We also find Pinots Noir and Meunier, mostly for sparkling wines, and some interesting autochthonous varieties such as Pinot Donny, which is in the Cheverny and Coteaux de Vendemois AOCs, and Grolot, mostly for rosé. And then they have a little bit of Gamay, which brings us to the styles.
Styles. There's so many nice styles, too. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why we wanted to do this regional wrap, because one of my favorite red grapes is Cabernet Franc. In case I haven't mentioned that before. And Val and I just bought a bunch of Cabernet Franc locally from Colorado because we both like it so much. These are such great light drinking wines. And so anyway, let's try to cover some styles, which is going to be very difficult. But sparkling wine is a biggie thanks to the miles of limestone caves and the tunnels of Tufo, is it?
I believe it is. I believe it is.
There are even different styles of sparkling wine, right? So what are some of the styles, Val?
Let's just start out by saying everything in Loire that's bubbly is called fin boule. Like fin, F-I-N-E-S, B-U-L-L-E. What does that mean? Tiny bubbles.
Tiny bubbles.
Tiny bubbles. Excuse us while we break out into song, because everything there is considered fine bubbles or tiny bubbles. But another little bauble about bubbles is that anything that's made in the Champagne method champenoise and Champagne, method traditionnelle, or method classique in the rest of France, that's called crémant. So in the Loire, we have all these fin boules. We have pétillant, which is more like a frisante, kind of very, very slightly fizzy. We have the bubbly wines that are museau, with a little bit more pressure in the bottle. And then we got the full-on crémant that is made with the traditional method. So all kinds of sparkling wines, as Steph mentioned, are made here, but they also make red, white, and rosé. And it is the sweet wines with the Chenin Blanc, you may remember from our Chenin Grape Gab, that make us super happy. So just for a little background on this, we do talk about something very important to this region. Remember I said moisture? I mentioned it back in episode 180 in the botrytis segment of the Semillon Grape Gab. Granted, Semillon isn't a grape in this region, but the mold is. The botrytis is. And we also had a Chenin Grape Gab back in episode 124 that you can refer back to. Because, Steph, you've had more Quart de Chambre than I believe I've had. And you did talk a little bit about it in the past.
I have. I've actually probably had more of the Côte du Lion than anything else. Right. But yeah, Chenin Blanc, I love it. And the bottle that I'm drinking, the first thought that came to my mind when I was drinking this Vouvray, which is Chenin Blanc, I was like, I could drink this whole bottle. Yeah. It was like moment of silence, how much I was like, why am I not drinking this more often?
It is such a crowd pleaser. Are you drinking a demi-sec or a sec?
It doesn't say either on it. It's just more of a dry style.
That's something that's important about this region. So we have such a variety of styles. We can start with the sparkling, and we'll get to those white wines, the red wines, the rosé wines, the sweet wines, the dry wines. But we've got different areas in this Middle Loire, the Anjou, the Saumur, the Touraine regions. But the Anjou and Saumur make red and white rosé styles along with the Crémant de Loire, and these are all the Mousseau or Crémant styles, so sparkling wines. Those come in white and rosé. We also have the fin boules like Montlouis-sur-Loire and Vouvray, like Steph is drinking, that also comes in a pétillant Mousseux. So you can also get a bubbly Vouvray, which is kind of cool. You can get a dry Vouvray. You can get a sweet Vouvray. You've got all these different styles in the middle. So when we get into the white wines, we need to point out that we also have the Vouvray that Steph has. We have the Saumur. We have Montlouis-sur-Loire, and they all have styles ranging from dry to sweet. So the only generalization we can make here about those wines is that there's something here for everyone, every food, and to please every crowd, from the easy sippers to the cerebral wine meditators.
Seriously, though, or drink the whole bottle. I mean, there is something for everybody. And if somebody says they don't like Chenin Blanc, they haven't had enough Chenin Blanc. Or if somebody says they don't like Vouvray, we have to maybe ask, how many different styles of Vouvray have you had? From how many different producers? That kind of a thing.
There's so many different styles of it. There are 2 appellations that create only dry, only white wines. Those are Jaunier and Cour-Cheverny. And then, of course, we got the rosé category. This is the big rosé, I'm going to say capital of the Loire. And I'm making these big, wide hand motions with my arms.
I thought you were thinking rosé all day kind of thing, like fist pumps.
All the way here with the rosé in the Cabernet and the rosé d'Anjou. Both are sweet. That's right. We said Cabernet sweet. So when you ever see Cabernet d'Anjou or rosé d'Anjou, generally those are sweet rosé wines from France. Did we say sweet rosé from France? We did. We've also got Rosé de Loire, Touraine Noble Jouet, and those are both dry rosés from Loire of France. And then there's a whole range of dry to sweet styles found in the Cabernet de Saumur rosé wines. What about the red only category, Steph?
So Anjou Gamay, Village and Village Brissac and Orléans Clary.
What's red and white but yummy all over, Steph? That means they make red and white styles.
Oh, that's funny. Saumur.
Here's some more factoids for you while we're at it. Get it? Saumur. Okay, red, white, and rosé styles.
That reminds me of our Semillon, Semillon to Saumur factoids or something.
Yes, Saumur. So we're going to talk some more about wines that come in a variety of red, white, and rosé styles. And these include the Chinon, the Cabernet Franc that's in my glass. This includes they have white appellations. They have white wines from Chinon is what I'm saying. They've got Coteau de Loire, Haut-Poitou, Orléans, Touraine, even Touraine Pétillant and Mousseux. Yes, a red sparkling wine from France. And then, of course, we've got 50 shades of red and pink, meaning these are appellations that come in red and rosé. You've seen Bourgogne, Saint-Nicolas de Bourgogne. That's right. You can get a rosé Bourgogne and a rosé Saint-Nicolas de Bourgogne. I've never seen one, but you can get them.
There's so many hashtag W25 challenges going on here. And Lynn needs to start drinking these crazy Loire wines and posting them for us.
I know, right? Lynn drinks herself around the world, and we mean that in a good way. I mean, she is studying hard, and I'll bet she's had quite a few of these. But you want to lay the dessert styles on us? Because I know this is a special place for you, Steph.
Well, I actually really wish I was, had a few more of these bottles in my wine cellar. But some of the sweet styles that you may or may not have heard of, Bonzo, Chaume, Côte de Lion, and Coir des Champs, they make some hell of amazing sweet wines.
Hella good, right?
Hella good and age-worthy. I mean, some of the ones that I do have in my basement, I'm saving for my these kids, my goddaughter and, all of these nieces and nephews and stuff. So these are the kind of wines that are really special. And, some of these Vouvrays and things, people don't think of laying those down and collecting those wines because they're so caught up in Sauternes or, some of the German sweet wines. But these are really special wines to also lay down.
Yes, thank you, botrytis. But we do need to stop here because the point of all this is to let you know that so many of these AOCs in the Loire Valley, they offer such a range of styles. So we've got sparkling, we got still, we got dry, we got sweet, we got red, we got white, and when every combination thereof. So I think if we've got nothing else across in this podcast is that all wine doesn't come in 3 flavors, red, white, and pink. Okay, they're just styles, the mouth feels, the colors, all these things are different, and you can't judge a wine by its color. Drink Loire. This isn't an ad, but it freaking should be. Steph?
Well, and I just want to say too, like last week when I went shopping for this episode, it wasn't very difficult to find 6 different really nice quality Loire wines in different colors, white, red, pink, sparkling, different styles, all at one liquor store. So, go out there, see what you can come up, do a tasting at home, with your neighbors or your friends and taste some of these things that you're like, I've never had this. I don't know what Val and Steph are talking about. That's when it's fun to use the blog and to kind of go, okay, this is what they said to look for, because maybe what we're saying doesn't translate on paper very well to you. At least that's my case, because I don't know how to spell French words. So anyhow, this is a good way to go, okay, look at the blog, write them down, take a screenshot, and go into your store. But we do have one more area we want to cover because it's very important, and that's the Upper Loire. Even though it's the smallest, it is no less influential on the Loire's regions. Now, this is where, and I was saying, I drove from Bordeaux to Paris. This is the area that's closer to Paris, just about 80 miles south and only 70 miles west of the northern reaches of Burgundy. Isn't that crazy? So, yeah, Loire, right at this area, you're kind of in the center of the country.
So this area is known as Loire Centre, but it's kind of the geographical description. It's toward the middle of France, but not to be confused with Middle Loire.
Yes, because it is confusing.
It is confusing, and it feels like we just spent a week discussing the Middle Loire.
And we kind of did. But yeah, and it is, I think what also is confusing, it's like, it's when it's talking about the center, like you said, it's not the center of the whole Loire region. So, that's where I always kind of like, what are we talking about again?
Yeah, we have a website that has really great maps, the Loire Valley website. And you guys, honestly, you can click on that. It has all the appellations laid out like looks like a Pinterest board, but more organized. And you can see all the different appellations, and you can see this really great map, and you can see what they mean by Loire Centre on there.
And the climate in this particular area, is different, right? So remember when we were talking about going from west to east, the climate changes. So this is where it's full on continental and escaping, the moderating influences of the warm, wet, lower Loire Valley. Oddly enough, we're back to, guess what? White grapes. Yes, white grapes. Actually, isn't it like the Loire is like more than half white grapes, I think?
I think so, yeah. And so after all that excitement in the Middle Loire, we're like, oh, we're back to mostly white grapes again. Yes, and here's what's really interesting about this region, and I think it's something that people need a constant reminder for, because Sauvignon Blanc is the name, and Sancerre, Pouilly-Fumé, and Concy are the main games, but Chasselas, as seen in Swiss wine, makes an appearance in a Puy-sur-Loire. That's not confusing at all. And the Pinot Gris and Cécy or Trécellier bring up the rear. But what's interesting is the red grapes are ruled by Pinot Noir and Gamay. So the wines in this part of France in this continental climate are dry, still and dry. But they have all the colors from white to red to rosé and everything in between.
It's like when we say gropes. It's like grow and grapes together is like grope.
I wish I could just have a piece of software that would go through and find all the times we said gropes and just put them into one little soundbite. Gropes.
Oh my God, we'd have a gropes jingle.
It'd be, yes.
But Sancerre and Pouilly-Fumé, what do they taste like? Well, they're kind of identical. I mean, I wouldn't want to be blind tasting them, and to try and decide which one's which, but light to medium bodied, citrusy, herbaceous, energetic, just think of really great Sauvignon Blanc. And Pouilly-Fumé might have a slight flintiness or maybe texturally a little bit rounder or fuller, but they are very, very similar. What's also similar are some of the other white wines from that area, Concy, Rouilly, and Menetou Salon. and they are dry, crisp. These lovely Sauvignon Blancs that should be opened and consumed while they are still young and fresh. And speaking of young and fresh, are also the light red wines and rosés, right? So either the Pinot Noir or they have some rosés that are Pinot Noir or also Pinot Gris rosés. And those should also be consumed young. So, but an alternative to look for when you're looking for some light French reds. Love this area. Just love the wines. Love the red Sancerre, even though I don't see it very often. Very cool. And Rouilly, not to be confused with the other Rouilly from Burgundy that right. I can't even say the difference. I really don't know how to say one between the other, but totally different things, sound alike, somewhat look alike words.
Yeah, one is got just R-U-L-L-Y. That one's at Rouilly, and that is in Burgundy. And this one is like Rouilly.
Rouilly.
Yes. Yeah, like Trompe l'Oeil or something like that. I don't know. Anyway.
Yes.
Yeah, and Ménétu-Salon as well. And the final point here is red Sancerre, yes. Rosé, yes. Thank you, Pinot, much.
Did we confuse anybody? And is your mind exploding yet?
Yeah, and honestly, we did this in 30 minutes, and that is absolutely crazy. There's a lot more we could have told you about the soils. We could talk about the flinty soils and the silex and the tuffeau and all these really great things that happen in the Loire, but that would take days, and we have to get on with our weekend here. So for more information and study, we do want to direct you to the LoireValleyWine.com website. Follow them on Twitter. They have an absolutely stunning feed. I haven't even checked out their Instagram feed, but their website is so easy to navigate, and it does list most of these appellations. You can click on them and describe the wines, and you can make it like, close your eyes, click on one, then go buy it kind of thing. So it's a hashtag W25 treasure trove. It's a beautiful website. So definitely check that out.
You could spend like the whole year of 2019 just drinking new Loire wines. That would be like really fun.
One of the things we started out to do when we started this podcast was to give people resources also.
Yeah.
So we don't know all and see all, but we do want to give you guys somewhere else to go. So if you are studying and you are interested, we can help you with that.
Definitely.
Shout outs.
And moving on to our shout outs. To our sponsor, WTSO, because with wines still sold out, you can easily expand your age-worthy wine collection, like some of these Loire wines, with only a few clicks, and then the wine just like magically just shows up at your door, which we love.
We do love that, and I am digging on the Chinon that showed up in my door, and you too can dig on whatever they're offering at weeklytasting.com/W25. That is your page. That is your place to go sign up, get started, and make sure you get their weekly emails that gives you the offerings, because there's a Piemonte tasting in there right now that is sick. It looks really awesome. So go to our webpage or just click on the link. And now on to Patreon love. Steph?
Yes, to our Reserva Superiore supporter, Robin from Girls Gone Grape, our Reserva supporter, Auntie in Georgia, our Tenacious Tasters, Jeff E. from the We Like Drinking podcast, Sebastian of Sassy Italy Tours, Jen in Maryland, David and Lisa in Illinois, Anne-Marie in Virginia, Lynn from Savor the Harvest blog.
And our newest Tenacious Taster is Sharon in Florida. Our It's Not 5 O'Clock and We Don't Care listeners, we have Meg in South Dakota, Clay in Arizona. In California, we have John, Andrew, Aswani, and Kristen. Chantel is in Ontario, Canada. Mary Lou is in Pennsylvania. Kathy in Georgia. Chris, Janet, and Diane in Colorado. Stephen, Renee in Illinois. Kathy in Tennessee. Sean in Ohio. And Ashley and Sarah are in North Carolina.
And our Tastemaker listeners, David in Scotland, Carol in Kentucky, Karen in California, Chip and Katie in Pennsylvania, Serena in New York, Annie in Colorado, and Danielle. And you can go to wine25.com and click on support to support this show and learn more.
And between weekly episodes, you can find goodies on our website, wine25.com, or find us in the social spaces at wine25. But until next week, everybody, cheers!
Thank you for listening to the Wine to Five podcast. Be sure to check us out at Facebook/WineTWO5 and tune in next week for more fun and useful sip tips.